We're going to mix some African philosophy with some Buddhism and some contemporary American philosophy. Ubuntu is an African philosophy of humanity towards others. It's recognizing that we're all actually entangled. We're all part of the same society, and as such, we influence each other. So each one of us by ourselves is not fully responsible for everything that we're doing because society has a major influence on us. And that also includes healing. It's very important to help others heal by actually practicing goodwill towards each other. It's a very positive outlook on mental health and, from my experience, what addiction looks like. There's a tribe that practices Ubuntu that whenever someone does something wrong, they bombard them with praise. They actually celebrate them and they help them feel better. What's the reason for that? There are studies that show that psychopaths, their brains don't change. They don't change over time. And you know why that is? I believe it's because no one loves them. When someone does something psychopathic, people just want to throw them away, of course, and understandably. But if no one loves a person who's struggling, then the brain won't change. Why would they know how to change? So the idea in this tribe is that we should support each other when we make mistakes. Imagine rehabs in this country, and I work with addiction a lot. Imagine rehabs and how we generally tend to focus on things like shame and guilt, right? And punishment and punitive. What if we celebrated each other when we made a mistake? Just imagine what that would look like, too. Instead of sending someone to jail, it's let's have a party in their honor. Why? Again, as a concept, it's to reconnect a person back to their humanity. If all we do is focus on the bad of things, like the Course in Miracles says, it's easy to see the dark in each other. Miracles says, but we have to see the light in each other, which is what Ubuntu is, right? To focus on the humanity in each other. And it's a very optimistic concept and a philosophy that's very helpful if we at least apply it in our own lives. Now, I'm not saying that's what we should do in American society. That takes a while for us to get there. It doesn't mean we should never be punishing people at all either. There's a role for jail for sure, but we could switch a little bit towards celebrating each other a little bit more often, especially when we make mistakes, to reconnect us to our humanity. So there's two concepts I'd like to touch on. One is a Buddhist word, another is contemporary American philosophy. One is the Buddhist concept of mudita. Now in English we have a word, jealousy, and we all know what that means. When someone else has something that you want and it bugs you. Well, what's the opposite of jealousy in English? There really isn't a word for it. We don't even have a concept really what that's like. There's a word in Buddhism, however, the mudita, which is basically practicing joy for someone else's success, especially if it's something that you wanted. Being happy for the other guy if they just won a championship, shaking their hand, right? Mudita is a form of Ubuntu then. It's still celebrating the collective humanity of all. Then there's a concept that's more of a contemporary American philosophy called pronoia. Now we all know paranoia. Paranoia is this sneaking suspicion that everybody's out to get you, right? And you have this fear, like around every corner, that something's going to happen and it's going to be bad. That's paranoia. Well, pronoia is the opposite. It's the sneaking suspicion that the world is a conspiracy on your behalf. That everything that happens to you is actually teaching you something. It's encouraging you to somehow grow. In New Eyes, we call this the evolution of consciousness, right? Whatever happens to you is raising the bar on your consciousness development. It's forcing us to become more spiritual, whatever happens. Now this is why when the Bible says don't eat off the tree of good and bad, the tree of good and evil, that tree ends up becoming an ego obsession if we do that. We are looking for results in a good or bad way, then we label stuff good or bad. What pronoia is it points you to something else called spirit. The idea that if something good happens to you, celebrate it. Be thankful for it, you know? Show gratitude and appreciation. Enjoy that. But when bad stuff happens, we don't have to freak out about it. We don't even have to call it bad. Pronoia is, what am I learning here? What is the universe showing me right now? And it's actually very simple. If you think of it like this, it's like if something bad happens, it's showing you a virtue that you need to practice. If I'm in a long traffic jam and I'm feeling really impatient, is it the universe teaching us patience? Absolutely. If you're jealous because someone has something that you want, nobody likes the feeling of jealousy. Well, it's teaching you mudita. Practice being happy for the other guy. See how you feel. When you're resenting someone because they did something to you that bothers you and somehow hurts your feelings and you practice forgiveness, well, guess what? The ego hates that. It's another separation between what you really are and the ego. That's where the spirit shows up. And this is, everything that happens to you is showing you this. It's actually a perfect system that way. That all of us are learning these lessons we need to be learning. What does that mean for us? We're allowed to practice pronoia. You can practice paranoia if it works for you. I don't think too many people like that. You can practice jealousy. Doesn't get you anywhere. Mudita, however, will. And Ubuntu works especially well if we look at each other in a humanity way as opposed to the judgment way that we tend to do. It's why Jesus teaches to love another as oneself. And that's the last of his commandments, as he says. First, love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love another as oneself. Well, that's Ubuntu. And the idea is to see the other person as a product of the same system, and all of us have the same ultimate goals, again, whether we know it or not. We should celebrate the humanity in each other. That means we should celebrate when someone else does something good. We should celebrate all things, as Paul says. We should celebrate all things that are praiseworthy and excellent and pure and good. We should celebrate those things, not constantly pointing out all the bad. And we should absolutely celebrate the idea that stuff happens to teach us spiritual things, and it's not all about this physical place. In the end, it's this question that we can ask ourselves on a daily basis. When you go about your lives and you're experiencing something, whether it's good or bad, you can ask yourself this question. What is God trying to teach me in this moment? Right? And if it's traffic, that's pretty obvious. If it's death of a loved one, well, what is that pain trying to teach you? Well, grief is something you want to work towards. Up to and including the idea that loved ones don't actually die. They transition to another dimension. If that's what it turns out to be, then the grief has pushed you to that way of thinking. No one stays in this realm, if you will, according to the Eastern philosophies, if they die with resentment and regrets. And what are we supposed to learn how to do while we're here? Let that go. That's what forgiveness does. Helps you release this. And so the pain that we experience of that which we call bad is always showing us who we truly are. And if we practice that with each other, we'll get healthier much quicker.